So, Jim, having worked as a criminal defense lawyer for more than 25 years, how similar or different would you say your clients have been to Walter White?
They are different in that, well, at least with respect to clients of mine who have been involved in drug dealing and in large scale drug dealing, they have not nearly had Walt White's educational level. Um, they've been similar in that they are extremely intelligent people when they are higher up in the organization and have been doing it a long time, which means that they've been rather successful. But unlike Walter White, they've come to drug dealing not as a direct result of their of higher education, but as a direct result of a lack of education.
How about people like Jesse?
People like Jesse are unfortunately rather common in as much as people who have drug problems and need drugs on a regular basis often find that drug dealing on a street level, if you will, is a great way to do it. Now, Jesse obviously gets a little bit higher up in the organization because Walt starts to trust him as the show progresses. But his original link to the drug trade is that he was a user himself and had a lot of other friends who were users and could thus hook Walt into the street trade. And unfortunately, a lot of people on the street level are users also.
How about some of the other characters? How realistic or fanciful are they?
You know, I think that some of them obviously have to be a little bit embellished because they have to make the show a little bit more interesting and entertaining. But I've actually met people in my lifetime who you could really say, but for their involvement in this kind of activity, might very well have had, you know, very successful and much more conventional lives. And you're dealing with a business, and like any other business, there is competition, and also like any other business, there are turf wars. But drug dealers can't abide by uniform licensing agreements. They don't have the antitrust laws to avail themselves of, and so they use self-help methods. And um, I think probably in the drug trade, violence has proven to be a somewhat effective um, tool in maintaining one's base.
So, based on your real life experiences, what would you say would be realistic outcomes for any of the characters in the show?
Um, well, I think a realistic outcome for Walt is he's either going to be prosecuted or killed by a rival, because those issues exist in the show right now. The most interesting um, character right now in terms of outcome to me is Jesse, because he has such an intense level of guilt over everything that he's done and been a part of. Um, he's been starting last season. You could tell that um, he was getting to a point where he was going to have to make very serious amends in order to be able to really live with himself. And so, yeah.
And I think you've mentioned that that makes him great for becoming a governmental witness,
Well, that was going to
perhaps.
be my point. I see him as becoming a cooperator. And if he becomes a cooperator because of what he knows and who he knows and the violent levels of the people against whom he would be providing information, he's a great candidate to go into WITSEC.
How would you compare Skylar's relationship with Walt with what you've seen in real life?
Well, I suppose that Schuyler has remained present um, longer than I think I would have expected to see in real life. That is to say, you know, parents and siblings stick around, but often spouses take off.
Do you think the government will come in and take possession of all their property?
Well, we know a little bit of a hint about that already from the first episode of this season, um, and we'll see more of that. It'll get fleshed out, but we know that the white residents is no longer. It's basically been chained up and more or less abandoned, and the pool is being used as a skateboard park now. So we know that much about the White House. But beyond that, I think you would expect that if there is going to be a prosecution here, and certainly if Hank has his way, there will be, forfeiture would be a big piece of that.
From what I've read in the news with drug cases, rich people go to rehab and poor people go to prison. Is this another example of the unfortunate economic disparities with the law?
It is in part, and I'll explain that. If you are wealthy, you're not going to have to get involved in drug dealing um, in order to be able to support your habit. You're able to afford your drugs as part of your lifestyle. And so that keeps you buffered from the drug trade in one respect. Um, on the other hand, if you're a poor person and you have a drug problem, then drug dealing is going to be the most efficient means for you to get the drugs that you need. Um, by the same token, if a rich person does get arrested, um, they are able to be proactive in undertaking drug treatment and actually showing some level at a desire to rehabilitate themselves without impetus of a sentence.